I wasn't supposed to be there. She didn't invite me, didn't mention it until the last minute, and only told me because I overheard her on the phone saying, "No, he's not coming. It's just me." That was last Friday. I was in the hallway, fixing the ceiling vent that never stops rattling, when I heard her voice, calm, elegant, a little too cheerful for someone who leaves dishes in the sink for days. She was getting ready, curling her hair in the bathroom mirror, talking like I didn't exist. Like I was some roommate she tolerated. My stomach tightened. So I asked, not aggressively, just a quiet, "What's the event tonight?" She froze. That half-second pause before she said, "Oh, it's just a quick work thing. One of those formal dinners. Very corporate. Very boring. You wouldn't enjoy it." Then she slipped on that black dress I hadn't seen in a year. The one she wore when she wanted to make a statement. Hair perfect. Heels like knives. Lipstick 2 shades too bold for corporate and boring. So yeah, I followed her. I know. That sounds pathetic. But I didn't sneak in. I just got in my car after she left, waited 10 minutes, and showed up at the venue like I belonged there. She told me once where her boss likes to host these things. A members-only rooftop club with floor-to-ceiling glass and tiny desserts you eat with gold-plated forks. I walked in without saying a word. No drama. No accusations. Just walked in, scanned the crowd, and found her in seconds. And the second she saw me, her smile vanished. She was standing beside her boss, flanked by a few sleek-looking co-workers in expensive suits. She looked like she belonged in a magazine. I looked like I'd just come from a gas station. But I didn't care. I walked straight to the bar and stood there. She didn't come over. She didn't even acknowledge me. For 40 minutes I stood in that room like a ghost. She avoided eye contact, laughed a little louder, touched her colleague's shoulder, whispered into someone else's ear. Her entire body language screamed one thing: he's not with me. No one greeted me. No one asked who I was. I watched her from a distance, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like, but I've been ignored before. This was different. This was deliberate. So I left. Quiet. No text. No confrontation. I took the elevator alone, walked past a row of luxury cars, got in my rusted old Toyota, and sat there gripping the steering wheel with shaking hands. 7 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Marissa, where are you?" 10 seconds after that. "Please come back. I didn't know you were coming." Another one. "I'm sorry. Just, please don't do this." But I was already halfway down the highway, driving into a silence I hadn't felt in years, the kind that doesn't scream or cry. It just confirms what you already knew. When I left the rooftop that night, I didn't slam a door. I didn't send a dramatic message or write a long passive-aggressive post online. I just drove. No music. No GPS. Just the road and the realization that somewhere between "I love you" and "I'll be home late," I had stopped being part of her story. She texted me 5 times on the drive back, then called twice. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because I didn't know what I'd say. What do you say when the person you built your life around looks straight through you like a stranger in line at a coffee shop? I got home first. I sat in the kitchen for a while, staring at the plant we never remembered to water. I waited, not knowing if I wanted her to walk through the door or never come home at all. It was nearly midnight when she finally arrived. Heels clacking, perfume trailing behind her like she was still at that party. She walked in confidently, scrolling her phone, probably rehearsing an apology or some twisted version of events that would make it all seem like I was the one overreacting. But the second her eyes landed on the dining table, she froze. The key was gone. I had taken my house key off her ring. Not to be dramatic, not as some kind of grand threat, just as a signal. A silent one, because I wasn't going to be the one chasing anymore. She stood there staring at the empty hook for a solid 10 seconds. I watched her from the hallway, just out of view. I could tell she knew. Not everything. Not yet, but enough. Enough to realize that something had shifted. She called out my name, soft at first, then again louder. When I stepped into the light, she looked at me like she expected me to yell, or cry, or beg, but I didn't. I just asked, "Why'd you lie?" Her face dropped, fast. "What do you mean?" "You told someone on the phone I wasn't coming. You called it just a boring work thing. But you dressed like you were trying to be remembered. You smiled like I didn't exist. And when I stood 10 feet away, you pretended you were there alone." She tried to deny it, stumbled over words, said things like, "It wasn't the right time, and you took it the wrong way," and my personal favorite, "You're making this into something it's not." That's when I finally sat down and said, "Then tell me what it was." She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her phone again, as if maybe someone had texted her a better excuse. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse her of cheating. I didn't have to. The silence did all the heavy lifting. And then, the most shocking thing happened. She started crying, but not the kind of tears that come from guilt. These were frustrated, angry tears, like she was mad at me for ruining her night. She said I embarrassed her, that showing up uninvited made things complicated with her boss, that he asked who I was, and she didn't know what to say without causing confusion. I asked her, confusion about what? That you're married? Or that you didn't want to be? That was the first time she didn't have an answer. She stood there with mascara starting to streak and said something I'll never forget. "You were never supposed to be part of that world." And I just whispered back, "I know." Then I walked past her, up the stairs, and closed the bedroom door. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee. It was her peace offering, the way she always tried to pretend things hadn't happened. She'd clink the mug on the counter, hum a little tune, act like everything was fine, like the night before was just a bad dream. But I wasn't playing along this time. I walked into the kitchen, and there she was, sitting on the bar stool, looking at her phone, scrolling like it held the answer to whatever came next. When she saw me, she smiled like we were just two people on a normal Saturday morning. She gestured to the coffee. "I made your favorite," she said, like that would fix the fact she'd practically erased me from her public life. I didn't sit down. I didn't touch the coffee. Instead, I asked one simple question. "Why him?" Her eyes flickered. "What? At the party? That guy in the maroon blazer. The one you couldn't stop touching. Was he the reason you didn't want me there?" She didn't deny knowing who I meant. That alone told me everything. "He's just a colleague," she said carefully. "It wasn't like that. You're jumping to conclusions." "No, Marissa," I said, my voice shaking. I didn't jump. I stood in a room full of people who looked at me like I was a mistake you forgot to delete. I watched you laugh with him like I hadn't existed in your life for 5 years. She looked down at her phone, again, like it might give her a script to follow. But I was done being polite. "You said I don't belong in that world," I continued. "And maybe you're right. Maybe I don't fit your polished new image. But don't pretend I'm imagining the way you treated me last night." She stood up, hard. "You don't get it, Eldon. That night was important. I've been working for months to get into that circle, to prove myself. You showing up like that, you made it harder." I stared at her, stunned. "So it wasn't about me embarrassing you. It was about you fitting in with them." She hesitated. "That was all I needed. I stayed home when you asked. I supported you when you were working late. I made excuses to family when you stopped showing up to dinners. I even convinced myself that maybe I was being insecure. But watching you last night, that wasn't insecurity. That was clarity." She didn't say anything, just stood there with her lips pressed into a thin line, like she was trying to hold in words she didn't want to admit. So I gave her something else instead. I booked a hotel for a few days. "Don't worry, I'll be gone before dinner." That got her attention. "You're leaving?" "I need space," I said. "Real space. Not the kind where I pretend it doesn't hurt when you erase me in front of your entire company." She followed me down the hallway, trying to reason, trying to say it was all a misunderstanding, that she didn't mean for it to come across that way, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But when I reached the bedroom, I showed her the suitcase. "Already packed. I'm not trying to punish you," I said, "but I won't stay somewhere I'm not wanted." She didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, arms folded, eyes full of a cocktail of emotions I couldn't even read anymore. Pride, fear, maybe even regret. As I walked out the front door, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. The hotel wasn't anything fancy. A second-floor room above a dated pizza place with flickering hallway lights and a vending machine that ate quarters. But somehow, that crummy room felt more like home than the house I'd left behind. No silent judgments. No filtered smiles. Just me, the buzz of the ceiling fan, and the hollow kind of peace that follows emotional exhaustion. I hadn't planned to tell anyone what happened. I didn't want to make it public. But life has a way of dragging things into the light, especially when someone's been carefully painting over the cracks. It started with a call from my sister, Danica. She said she'd run into Marissa earlier that morning at a cafe near her office. Apparently, Marissa was acting totally fine, even smiled and said we were just having a little space to recharge. Danica said she looked almost relieved. like someone who dodged a bullet. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to defend myself, and I wasn't ready to explain. So I said, yeah, something like that, and let the conversation die. But that's when the weird part began. Later that day, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Just 2 lines. You don't know me, but I know about Marissa and Derek. Thought you should know too. Attached was a photo, blurry but clear enough. Marissa, sitting in what looked like a booth at a bar, her hand resting on the chest of the same guy from the rooftop event, maroon blazer and all. He had his arm around her waist. Her eyes were closed like she was laughing or whispering something. It wasn't professional, not even close. I stared at that image for over an hour. Zoomed in, zoomed out, tried to rationalize. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was photoshopped. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew. The way she acted around him. The way she dismissed me like I was bad press. It all added up. And then came the knock. Not at the hotel room. Back at the house. I'd gone back to grab some documents from the filing cabinet in our home office. I was hoping she'd be at work, but of course, she wasn't. She answered the door with that startled deer-in-headlights look like she'd seen a ghost. I walked past her without a word and went straight for the drawer. But then, barely a minute later, the doorbell rang. And he walked in. Maroon blazer. Tall. Arrogant posture. Derek. Marissa's eyes blew wide like she hadn't expected him to show up. Or maybe hadn't expected me to still be there. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me. No one said a word. Not for a good 10 seconds. Then he chuckled. A low, smug sound. So, this is awkward. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I just asked her, without turning around. Did you tell him I moved out? Or was this just a lucky coincidence? She said nothing. Absolutely nothing. That silence. It was louder than any confession. Derek raised his hands like he was trying to be the bigger man. Look, I didn't come here to start anything. I thought you'd be gone already. I finally turned to him. Trust me, so did I. He smirked again. But it didn't land like he wanted it to. Because Marissa suddenly stepped between us and said, in a brittle voice I didn't recognize, you need to go. Now. He looked confused. You said. I said go. Something had cracked in her voice. A kind of panic that wasn't there before. Derek stared at her for a second, then scoffed and walked out. When the door shut behind him, the silence between us was suffocating. I looked her dead in the eyes. How long? She didn't cry, didn't deny, just whispered, since May. That was 5 months. 5 months of dinners, of shared beds, of laughing at my jokes while she texted him under the table. 5 months of pretending I still mattered. I walked out without another word. But I wasn't just walking away anymore. I was preparing to disappear completely, and I knew exactly how to do it. I didn't go back to the hotel that night. I didn't even drive far. I just sat in the parking lot of a closed garden center, watching the condensation build up on my windshield as my world continued unraveling. There's something indescribable about realizing you were nothing more than a placeholder in someone else's storyline, the dependable backdrop to their double life. I wasn't angry anymore, not even heartbroken. I was something colder, focused. I went through my phone and found exactly what I needed. 6 months ago, Marissa insisted we switch to a shared cloud drive, said it would streamline finances and household stuff. She even connected it to her work email. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now, I opened the folder labeled Receipts and Statements and scrolled through backups she never deleted. That's when I saw them. Dinner reservations for 2 at places she never mentioned. Ride receipts to addresses I didn't recognize. One recurring drop-off at a luxury apartment complex across town. Not her office, not her gym, not anywhere she had a reason to be. My hands were shaking, but not from nerves. From clarity. She'd built an entire side life. Carefully, quietly, and I'd been financing pieces of it without even knowing. The next morning, I met with an attorney. A woman named Laurel. Calm, professional, sharp-eyed. I didn't even have to explain everything. Just showed her the receipts, the photo, the silence from the night of the party. She nodded slowly and said, if you want out, we can make this clean. But if you want her to feel it, we do it smart. I chose smart. We froze the joint account. I rerouted my paychecks. I moved all my personal documents into a lockbox. And most importantly, I called the landlord, because despite the house being in both our names, the lease renewal was coming up, and she'd forgotten to file the extension paperwork. I asked that they put it under my name only, effective immediately. The landlord agreed, citing recent inconsistencies with her rent contributions. I didn't ask questions. I just signed. Then came the final piece. That weekend, Marissa had her company's Fall Innovation Gala. Big event. All employees were required to attend with their plus ones. I knew she wouldn't bring me. She wouldn't dare. Not after everything. But I also knew something she didn't. Her firm's new legal consultant, the one they'd just hired to oversee partnership contracts, was someone I went to college with. Evan. We weren't close, but we'd stayed loosely connected on LinkedIn. So I sent him a message. I didn't give him the whole sob story. Just asked if I could be added to the guest list for the gala under a networking pretense. Evan didn't ask questions. He said sure. Told me to wear black tie and arrive early. Said he'd walk me in himself. And that's exactly what I did. I arrived an hour before the main program, got my name badge, and walked through the glass doors like I had every right to be there. The same way I'd walked into the rooftop party 2 weeks earlier. Only this time, I wasn't invisible. People greeted me, smiled, made small talk. Evan introduced me to 2 execs, then slipped away. I didn't have to look far to find Marissa. She was standing near the open bar with a glass of wine. In that same black dress from before, her smile perfectly curated, until she turned and saw me. She froze. Her smile faltered. And then, and I swear this happened in slow motion, Derek walked up beside her and handed her another drink. She reached for it, still staring at me, and her hand trembled just enough to spill a drop down her wrist. I didn't approach. I didn't wave. I just nodded slightly and turned away. That night, I didn't say a word to her. I let her live in the tension, the confusion, the unraveling. Because now, she was the one being watched. She was the one out of place. And I had only just started. 2 days after the gala, Marissa showed up at my hotel. Not at home, not with a text or a call. She came to the front desk, asked for me by name, and when I opened the door to my room, she looked nothing like the woman from that party. No polished smiles, no power walk in heels. She stood there in flats and a wrinkled cardigan, clutching her phone like it might fall apart in her hands. I need to talk, she said. I didn't invite her in. I stepped out instead. We ended up sitting on a bench outside, next to a row of overflowing trash bins and a busted parking meter. Very on-brand for the state of our marriage. She didn't speak for the first full minute, just stared down at her hands, twisting the ring she no longer wore. Then she said, I didn't think you'd actually come to the gala. I kept my voice flat. You thought I'd stay in hiding while you paraded him around? She flinched. I didn't parade anyone. You didn't stop him from acting like your husband in front of your coworkers. Pretty sure that counts. She exhaled sharply. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. There it was. The script. I almost laughed. No, Marissa, I said. You don't understand the damage you've done. You lied, you cheated, and you only started caring when it began threatening your image. Her voice cracked. I never wanted it to get this far. It wasn't supposed to be. What? I interrupted. Wasn't supposed to be real? Wasn't supposed to fall apart? She shook her head, and for a second, I thought I saw guilt. Real guilt. But then came the line I didn't expect. They're investigating him now. That made me pause. What? Derek. Someone submitted an anonymous report to HR about his behavior with subordinates. Inappropriate relationships. Conflicts of interest. They've already called him in. And now they're asking questions about me. I said nothing. She stared at me with wide, furious eyes. Did you do that? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Her breathing picked up. This could ruin my career. I tilted my head, kind of like how you ruined our marriage. She stood up, pacing now, her hands fluttering at her sides. You don't get it, Eldon. You've always lived quietly. You don't care what people think. But I've worked for everything I have. I had to fight to be taken seriously. And one mistake, one stupid decision, and everything could fall apart. I stood too. So, I was the mistake? She didn't reply, and that silence told me more than words ever could. Before she could say anything else, I stepped back. You should leave now. She froze. Eldon, please. I'm not going to destroy your life, Marissa. You're doing that just fine on your own. But don't come here expecting sympathy, because the mess you made finally started staining your shoes. She didn't cry. I think she wanted to. But she just turned around, walked slowly back to her car, and drove off without looking back. As I watched her taillights disappear, I felt something strange in my chest. Not rage. Not grief. Relief. Because for the first time, She was no longer the mystery I couldn't solve. She was just another person who built her entire world on a lie and finally ran out of people to believe it. 3 days after she showed up at my hotel, I got a message from one of her former coworkers. Not a close friend, just someone I'd met once at a barbecue years ago. His name was Kellen, and he used to be in Marissa's department before transferring. The message was short, casual even, but what he wrote made me sit up in bed. Hey man, not trying to stir anything, but word spreading. Your wife's name is coming up in the inquiry. Apparently, the company had opened a formal investigation after Derek was reported for misconduct. The anonymous complaint wasn't just about him. It mentioned a pattern of favoritism and inappropriate behavior involving senior staff and selected junior employees. Marissa was named, not directly at first, but enough people had witnessed the quiet moments, the after-hours drinks, the secretive conference room conversations. Marissa, who had once carefully controlled every detail of her image, was now becoming the center of whisper campaigns. And the worst part for her? No one was confronting her directly. They were just backing away. Her work friends stopped answering calls. She wasn't invited to the weekly team lunch. A big client presentation she was supposed to lead, handed off to someone else. I didn't feel victorious. Not really. Watching someone spiral isn't as satisfying as people think. But I did feel something else, like justice had a heartbeat. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. That weekend, I went home. Not to stay, just to pick up the rest of my things. The house was quiet. Her car wasn't in the driveway. For once, I didn't feel like I was sneaking through someone else's space. I packed slowly, methodically, taking only what was mine. I left the wedding photo on the mantle. Not out of sentimentality, I just didn't want it anymore. As I was locking up, I noticed something strange on the kitchen counter. A notebook. Open. Marissa's handwriting. Pages and pages of frantic journaling. Some lines scratched out so violently the paper had torn. I know I shouldn't have read it. I almost didn't. But curiosity is a cruel thing. She'd written about the party. The moment I walked in. The silence. The humiliation. Not mine, hers. She wrote that she felt exposed, like her carefully managed life had cracked wide open. She mentioned how Derek had started pulling away after that night. How HR had called her in. How she couldn't sleep. And near the end, one line stood out. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just left. And somehow that hurt worse than any fight we ever had. I closed the notebook and left it right where I found it. Later that night, I got a call. Unknown number. I answered it out of habit. It was Derek. His voice was sharp, defensive. He told me to stop interfering in things I didn't understand. Said Marissa was spiraling and that I'd made my point. I let him rant for a full minute. Then I said, calmly, I haven't done anything. Yet. He tried to sound threatening, but you could hear it. The desperation under his arrogance. His reputation was crumbling, and mine? I didn't have one to protect. That made me dangerous in a way he wasn't prepared for. I hung up on him mid-sentence. Marissa had tried to erase me from her new world. Now that world was rejecting her, one silent gesture at a time. And I wasn't finished. The official email came on a Wednesday. A quick, formal statement from the company Marissa worked for. She was no longer employed there. Mutual separation due to internal restructuring, it said. But I knew better. Everyone in her world did. Derek had been dismissed the week prior, and the fallout swept through their department like wildfire. Whatever empire they were building together collapsed in silence. Not with scandalous headlines, but with closed doors and cold shoulders. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I didn't post cryptic quotes online or share lessons learned. I simply moved forward. 2 months later, I signed the lease on a small house 2 towns over. Nothing grand, but it had a little porch, a quiet yard, and a garage that didn't smell like mold. I furnished it on my own. Every item was something I chose. For the first time in years, the space I lived in actually felt like mine. I also started freelancing, consulting work with small manufacturing firms that needed logistics help. It was unglamorous, but steady, and most of all mine. I stopped waiting for someone else's version of success to define me. Then something unexpected happened. Her name was Brielle. She worked at the community center where I volunteered twice a week, helping kids with homework and robotics projects. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't the center of attention, but she listened when people spoke. She remembered small things. She laughed easily. And when I told her, nervously, one night over takeout, that I had just come out of a wreck of a marriage, She didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "You're allowed to start over." And so I did. It took time. A lot of it. Trust doesn't regrow overnight. But Brielle never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I was. And that, more than anything, healed me. I heard from Marissa once more. She emailed me a few months later. Said she was in therapy. Said she regretted how she handled everything. Said she hoped I was okay. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. But because I had nothing left to give her. I had already given everything, and it had been thrown away like a receipt for something she never meant to keep. Now, when I look back at that night on the rooftop, the moment she smiled at him like I didn't exist, I don't feel pain anymore. I feel distance, like it happened in another life. Because in a way it did. And this new life, it's mine.